Hello, welcome to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Tom Walton, and this week will just be a continuation, part 2 of the episode that I recorded with Dalton Gray of Alaska. This week we are going to dive into Dalton's adventures as a brown bear guide in Alaska, where he shares some tips, tactics, talking about guns, all the good things. It's going to be a good one, so stay tuned and on to the show. Thank you. Welcome to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, a place where backcountry warriors can share their stories of grit, service, healing, and wilderness adventures. I'm your host, Tom Walton, Marine Corps veteran, full-time cop, and aspiring hunting and fishing guide. Join me and others as we journey from the hood to the woods in pursuit of freedom in the outdoors. So on the spot and stock, when you guide grizzlies or brown bears, I guess would be more technically correct. You guide
Right.
brown bears every spring. So what goes into as far as like your methodology of finding a big brown bear for a client? Because now you're not just hunting for yourself, but you're hunting for a dude that paid you a bunch of money and he wants, I'm assuming, I don't know if you're not hunting interior, so probably they're looking for that 9-10 foot grizz or brown bear, so what goes into that? How are you finding those bears and stalking those bears for your clients?
So the area that I've always guided in the springtime is what I like to call a 90-10 ratio of boredom to adrenaline. It's going to be 90% the most absolute boring thing you will ever do in this state. But the 10% of absolute adrenaline, 100-yard dash type of excitement and race in, intercept, shoot, and actually kill a trophy brown bear is that 10% is what keeps all of us coming back. It's that good. But as far as what I do, I'm not an outfitter in Alaska. I don't actually contract the hunts myself. I'm in the trades world, you would call it a subcontractor, or an employee to an extent. I work for an outfitter that contracts the hunts and brings the clients up. Sometimes I know who I'm getting, sometimes I don't. Just kind of depends on the year. But I show up and I kind of have my camp where I go. Out to my spike camp from base camp, and so that the clients will fly into a small town on the coast, and then we go out to the town from base camp on the water. And that area, our spring first hunt, usually we have 2 rounds of hunters. The first round ends May 25th. That's when the season ends. So we have from about May 5th-ish is when we usually start the first round out to about May 25th. So we have anywhere from 14 to 20 days, depending on when the clients get there, to actually hunt with them. So usually all us guides get there first, obviously several days ahead of time. We've got to open up the cabins at base camp and clean camp up from the winter and pick up any blowdown and trees from winter storms. And then we assemble all the boats. We have a bunch of inflatable rafts and motors and that we use to kind of get around from base camp and operate there. And that outfitter is extremely accomplished in that area. He's a master guide. I forget which number he is, but along with any guide license, you get guide license number, whatever, and it's all in numerical order. And his is a master guide license, which you're only eligible for a master guide license if you have had an outfitter's license, I think, for at least 10 years and no bad reports from clients, all positive feedback, no violations, just nothing that's not above board, basically. And so he's a master guide from a number of years ago, and he actually apprenticed under the outfitter that used to hunt along with Fred Bear back in the day. So he's been around this area that we outfit in for decades and decades, and he's incredible wealth of knowledge. He's very quiet. He's not on social media. He doesn't do much advertising because he doesn't need to. It's a lot of word of mouth, and there's a few booking agents that work with us, and people just kind of know that if their hunt preference suits what we offer, then they get sent to us. So I have a spike camp that I'll operate on with a raft. in that first round of hunting. And we'll have like a 6-man tent set up for the spike camp. And it's not lightweight. It's all pretty bulky gear. You're not backpacking by any means at all. Usually I have my big Barney's pack plus a small duffel. I don't pack light. I usually bring a synthetic sleeping bag, so that's bulky. I bring some extra layers, stuff to change into when my first stuff gets wet, big puffy gear because it gets cold when you're on the water, and that humidity mixed with 40 degrees and wind, that's cold.
Yeah.
You bring some extra comforts that you would never bring on a backpacking type of hunt. But, Coleman 2-burner stove type of cooking setup and, pots and pans. And we bring eggs and coffee in a kettle. So a lot more amenities than you would usually have in other types of hunts. But that to me, I think is nice. I enjoy having a bit more comfort items. A picnic chair to sit in at the tent when you're not hunting is a wonderful thing. Not having to sit on the ground in a Crazy Creek chair, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I like my Crazy Creek, but nothing beats a classic Cabela's 4-legged chair with the arms and the cup holder to just sit in the middle of the day and take a nap in the sun. But so the clients will come out there, and at that point we'll kick off our hunt. And usually there's always a method to the madness. And a lot of the areas that we're hunting is beach, sea level type areas. It's very thick temperate rainforest timber, like Sitka spruce type of trees, big around trees. I mean, absolute logging quality forest, and mixed with alders and devil's club, which is lovely. And it's that from sea level all the way up to subalpine where the mountain goats are. And anything in between there, good luck, Chuck. If you can pull off a successful brown bear hunt every year and that year after year, then I'll give away my guide license. But it ain't happening in that part of the state. That's just not how you hunt them. Nobody that outfits in that part of the state hunts like that. So what you're doing is you have to wait for them to come down. So you're not hunting them in the subalpine up high. Number one, that's suicide because there's still snowpack and there's avalanches. Routinely, your spring afternoon will be interrupted by the rumbling of a small avalanche and a rock slide giving way and just rumbling on the side of the mountain and just taking out an entire section of trees. That's very, very common. You can't pay me enough to be up there looking for bears that are coming out of the den.
Yeah, no kidding.
Now, if you were to be there earlier, in that second half of April, different story. When the snowpack is still safe, and in different areas of the state, even like Kodiak season can be a lot earlier, or it is a lot earlier than ours. Usually, there are a lot of hunts that'll take place, sometimes even on snowshoes. But in the area that we operate, that's just not how we roll. So we're setting up camp at sea level, and we're always camping a decent distance away, usually at least a mile away from where we're actually going to look for the bears to be. Not that the bears wouldn't be in camp, but we know where they're at. So a lot of that is just dependent on two things, and that is beach grass and hot sows. So obviously we don't have bait, so we're looking for the natural bait of a sow that's coming into heat, and that a boar will come down to the beach and cut her track. And everywhere that a sow has walked along the beach line next to the brush, if she's in heat, she'll be up on her back 2 legs, rubbing on stuff, and she'll walk through the trees and she'll, rub up on things and spread her scent around. And when a boar comes through, I've seen it happen where a boar comes through 5 or 6 days later, and it's as if he's following her footstep for footstep. Their nose is uncanny. So the boars are looking for a girlfriend, but before that even happens, every bear is looking for food. So they bust out of the den in that late April time frame, and they'll kind of kick around up high for a couple of weeks, depending on the snowpack and depending on conditions, if it's still cold or if it snows again, and then they'll work their way over to an avalanche chute sometimes if there's some green buds popping through. They might spend a bit of time up high, and then they come down. And that's when we're looking for them. I'm looking for on that first hunt. If it's within the first 10 days of your first round hunt in May, we're not looking for a boar with a sow. You're not going to find it. That boar's going to be by himself. He might be on a sow's trail trying to, force the issue, but he's going to be by himself. So he comes down, and so do the sows. And the first thing they're doing when they get down to the beach is all that green, lush beach grass that's there to eat. So they're just looking to get a whole bunch of fiber in, get their guts moving, because they haven't eaten that much yet in the spring, and they've eaten nothing all winter. So you're looking for them in that beach grass, and obviously as the May showers continue, which is more like May typhoons, more like it, all that rain, and then you get a half a day of sunshine, and then you get a bunch more rain, and I mean serious rain. Like you're not sitting outside in rain gear type of rain. You better be sitting outside in rain gear underneath of a tarp type of rain. So you hang out and you just spend a lot of time from a vantage point. Usually you find a beach a good distance away. If you happen to be hunting a particular bay, and I mean a bay can be miles deep, you're looking on that coastline in that bay area, and you're out at the mouth, way far away with a spotting scope, and you're just watching from a distance. You're kind of getting a feel for what the activity is. How many bears are moving around? Are the bears active yet? Last spring on that first hunt at my spot, the first half a dozen bears I saw, with one exception, they were all super lethargic. As a police officer, it would be like if someone is just stoned out of their mind. They're just looking for the next bag of Cheetos, man. And that's how they act. They come out of there, and I mean, there was one that popped out in front of us at our glassing spot. He was a super rubbed out, really young bear, like a 7-foot bear, and it popped out, came out to the grass, and I looked at it, pointed out to the client, there's a bear right there. It was just a couple hundred yards away. I looked away, glassed the other beach across the bay, quite a ways away, and I'm panning around looking at the mountain goats up on top. And I went back to look for that bear, and it was gone. And then it stood up. So it was laying down, and they'll do that all the time. That they'll come down, they'll eat a little bit, and they'll lay down, and they'll lay down on their back and stretch. They're just like they woke up from their long nap. So that kind of behavior is very normal for early spring hunts like that. But we are looking to catch them down on the beach when they're looking for food. And then, the later into May that you get in that unit, May 25th is the closer for that section. That is right when the rut is starting. Towards the end of that season, for that first round of hunts at that outfit, you will see boars paired up with sows. It will happen. It's not really in full swing yet, but it's close. So if your hunt lasts that long, if you haven't gotten the bear yet, then you're looking for pairs. The size difference alone between a 10-foot boar and even an 8-foot sow or 8.5-foot sow, it makes the 8.5-foot sow look like a 2-year-old cub. That there is just something about how much body mass a bear has to put on to go from 9 foot to 10 foot. You would think, well, it's just a foot longer and a foot bigger around. That's not how it works. They put on like just the ratio of body weight that they have to put on to support that level of density and that bone structure. It's incredible. I have pictures of a 10-foot bear with an 8-foot sow, 8 foot or bigger, and it genuinely looks like a big dark sow with a 2-year-old cub until you get close enough to see it and you go, no, that's just a giant with a girlfriend.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, it's a blast, and honestly, it's very hit or miss as far as how many bears you can or will not see. That depends a lot on weather. Bears are surprisingly temperamental when it comes to foul weather. They like to just stay out of the open. They don't like to spend a lot of time out. If it's blowing and raining really, really hard, they're just not out all that often. Occasionally you'll catch one out there, but not very. I have not killed, well, let me think. I've killed one bear in weather that I almost didn't want to be outside hunting in. One. And that's, over the last half a dozen years of guiding. And so it's a lot smaller sample size than the other guides in camp that have been there for 30 plus years, but they all say the same thing and they all do the same thing. And I hunt the way that I do because I learned from them when I was a packer. If you're in your tent and you can't hear yourself think, the bears aren't out. That's what one of the guides used to say when I was packing for him. He said, the bears aren't out in this. Why would I be? So his saying is, you be out when the bears are out. And that means that it is mostly an evening/nighttime affair. And so usually it starts to get good after 8 o'clock at night. Very rarely in the spring do we see a lot of activity early in the morning, occasionally, but for the most part, it's a nighttime game. So usually you sleep in the morning. Sometimes I'll get up early and let the client sleep for a bit, and I'll get out and go, pan the spotting scope around, just make sure nothing's out that we're missing. But I've never shot a bear in the spring in the morning. I've shot one at middle of the day, but that was only because it was coming through camp and trying to come in the tent. But that was a different story. And that was a young dumb bear that didn't know any better. That was a stupid bear, and stupid bears are dead bears usually. So if you're looking for that big mature boar, though, they like to come out when it's cool. They'll wait until the evening, and they're very nocturnal. They'll come out usually around 8, 9 o'clock is when it'll start. And I've killed most of my brown bears between in the springtime between 10:30 and midnight. And it's real close to dark around that time, and that's super super common. So it's a nighttime game, so you need to get your sleep. But by the time we get back to camp and then get to bed after you eat dinner, if you don't want to eat before the evening hunt, usually personally I like to make my freeze dried meal at like 5 o'clock before we actually go to the glassing spot and spend the night there, for the next 7 hours. Excuse me. And but sometimes the clients aren't used to eating a big dinner that early, and so they want to wait. Usually about 2, 3 days into that of them eating dinner at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, they change up their schedule and they eat at 5 o'clock with me. But I always make sure to bring enough candy bars so that if they regret their decision, they can tide them over till we can get back to camp. But and then from there, if we spot a bear that we're going to go after, I'll use the one that happened last spring, for instance. We had seen that bear on the first day. And that bear was, I mentioned earlier, most of the early bears last spring on that first round were pretty lethargic. That bear was not. He had been out for a little while, and he was full of energy, and he was stomping around the territory. I don't know if he was just looking to pick a fight or if he was looking for a girlfriend way too fast in the season, but he was cantankerous just right off the bat. He had an attitude. He was very vocal. I spotted him. We moved in across the way from where we were over to the shoreline where he was kind of working, and we cut him off. And there was a big mudslide that had happened out on the open coastline there. And he got to a spot, and we were on the other side from him. So he was in between us and this big mudslide. And he was a quarter mile away from us at this point. I just got over there just to get closer and watch him. And first afternoon, the client had just gotten to my camp that morning. So we were hunting that night, and because he didn't have to take a bush plane in, so we don't have the same day airborne regulation to worry about. And a first day thing is always the big question mark. You want to be sure that if you're going to shoot a bear on the first day, it's worth it. However, that's difficult sometimes to make that decision because there's also the rule that we've all heard: pass ye not on the first day what ye would be happy with on the last day. But there's a line in there somewhere, and I was pretty confident in this spot that either we would get another crack at this bear if we passed on him, or we would see a bigger one. I figured he was in that low 9 foot range, right around 9. I knew he wasn't 10 plus, but I knew he was a good mature boar. But the odd thing about it, I'll get back to that. He got over to that mudslide. There's a bunch of trees down the water. And he got over and he put his front 2 feet up on this log, and he kind of looked down the water and realized that he couldn't just walk around, that he'd have to swim. And he turned around and he just kept his feet up on the front of the log, and he started bouncing on that log, and he started making what sounded like a gorilla sound, is all I can picture it as. It was just it was really strange. And he did that 4 or 5 times, just standing there, just seemingly just put off by the fact that he couldn't just walk down the beach like he wanted to. He turned around and he bounced his front feet on the beach, and he started walking right towards us. And he covered that quarter mile in what seemed like seconds, and he was walking quick. So he turned around and just raced back over towards us, and he got into like 60 yards of us. So by this time, I've got my phone on my tripod. I've got my rifle up. The client's got his gun up. All the while we're talking, and I'm trying to make a decision here, and he's trying to make a decision. I'm giving him my best guess on size, and then he's hemming and hawing. He's like, "You really think we can do better or find him again?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm confident that if we don't see this bear again in this area, that's going to mean that there's a bigger one, and we'll get him instead." And in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking to myself, please don't screw this up and lose the client a bear on day one and then have him get nothing and be skunked. That's all that's going through my mind. So at 60 yards, the bear was going to walk right into us. He wasn't picking his head up, never looked at us. I've got the Zodiac right offshore, a big black raft sitting out in the water, tied up to shore. Didn't even look at the boat, just came strutting just right down the beach, just right at us. And I stood up at 60 yards, and you can see it in the video. I stood up. All right, that's close enough. And he just turned and took off and busted into the alders. And that night, we reviewed the footage. I walked over to his tracks and sized up his front foot, just to really get an idea, just a physical idea of, all right, I think this bear is this big. What do the tracks say? And it lined up to exactly what I thought it was going to be, somewhere in that 9-foot range. We got back to camp that night in the dark, and now we start talking, and then the banter goes back and forth. And should we have passed on him? Do you think we can do better? And so I'm trying to be, positive, and we looked at the footage, and deep down inside, I'm telling myself, if we see that bear again, we should shoot that bear. Well, we saw him the next day, and the client said again, well, I think let's wait. It's still only day 2. Let's just be patient. And I said, okay, that's up to you. You know what this is. I'm 100% confident this is how big this bear is. I think I would be happy for you to shoot it. I think you would like it, but if you want to wait, that's fine. So we waited, and then we didn't see him again for like 5 or 6 days. So by that point, we hadn't seen another bigger boar yet. And I know that area well enough that I said, I'll bet you, and this was after like 2 days of not seeing him. I said, I'll bet you he's doing this loop. And I pulled up my maps, and there's a couple of big mountain passes over on this peninsula of land where we were kind of camped on one side of. And I said, I'll bet you he just went on a big run around, and he's just doing a territorial check. He's just on patrol. This bear is very outspoken. He's the big boss hog, and he wants everybody else to know it. So if there's a bigger bear, he's going to have to fight this one first. So 5 or 6 days went by, and he popped out again. And it was, again, I think it was within 45 minutes of dark. I mean, it was helter skelter. And he popped out, and we had to make a move quick. We took the raft and kind of got over on the other side of a long beach and cut him off. And of course, you have to be really, really quiet. Long story short, we ended up getting into position where I thought he was going to pop out within 100 yards of us. And he did not. He popped out at like 200 yards. And there was a little bit of a field at this spot on the beach. He was out in the grass, and he put his head down and started eating, which was the first time that I had seen him stand still in 3 times that we had seen him. So I said 2 things. If we're going to kill him, we got to move, because this ain't going to last long. He's not going to stay here long. And it's almost dark. So we made a play on him. And as a rule of thumb, we don't like clients having to shoot bears past about 100 yards. I prefer it to be anywhere from 70 to 80 yards, I think is about the perfect range. I think that's beautiful. Closer than 60 or 70 yards, and the clients kind of tend to get a little bit nervous. And which, just being that close to a bear like that, the nerves just set in. I would rather have the bear a little bit further away, where they actually have to use a little bit of magnification in their scope, because that makes them feel like they have a safe distance. And I think the nerves are a little bit more settled there, but not usually over 100 or 120 yards. Like that's a poke. And this bear was out at about 150 or 160 yards. And we ran out of cover, and it was getting dark. And I said, all right. And of course, by this point, I'd been with this client for about a week at this point, and we had talked in great extent about shot placement and where I wanted him to shoot a bear first with the first bullet. And my thing is, you got to kill him with the first shot. The first shot's got to be a lung shot. You'll hear a lot of this debate online if you're in on any of these bear hunting forums, and the old adage that people love to cling to for some reason is break them down, shoot them in the shoulder. That way it takes out their 4-wheel drive. And they have all these really cool sayings about how to get yourself bit. And that's, I think, horrible advice. I really do. If all else fails, and this is what I tell every single client, if all else fails, your gun's going to go off one time. That bullet needs to go through the lungs, smack through the lungs. If your gun jams and that bear runs, and my gun misfires on a backup shot and then jams, worst of the worst situation happens, and we only get one shot off in this bear, I want to know that I can wait 20 minutes, and I'm going to go in the woods and find a dead brown bear. I don't want to go in there thinking, he shot it in the front leg. Did he get any lung with it? Because I've done that before too, and the answer was absolutely not. And a one-lunged bear with one broken front leg that squares 10.5 foot is very much alive and well and capable of eating your lunch. So I always tell them, kill him with the first shot, and then have fun with the rest of it. empty your gun. If a bear drops at the first shot, like lights out, head hits the dirt quick, do not turn around and high five me. Shoot him again, because there's a pretty good chance that you shot high, and if you didn't directly hit him in the spine, all you did was zap him, and he's going to get up. And when he gets up, he's not going to stand there and look around to see what happened. He's going to be gone. So if you're doing the bro hug and yeah, we got him, and because you just made what you think is a one-shot glory kill, there's a high chance that you're just going to lose that bear altogether. So I tell them, you paid a lot of money to be here. Spend $30 in ammunition and empty your gun. So we got into about 150 yards back to this bear, and the client was on a tripod with just a yoke, just a little Y yoke on top of the tripod, and he got into a nice standing position. I was just shooting off of one knee, and I was ready. I had my phone on a tripod mount and just for filming, and I told him, I said, all right, if you like it, let's wait till he gives us a good shot. And he was, at that point, the bear started to move a little bit, and I made a loud noise to him. I think I just used a deer sound. Like I don't know why. It seems to get their attention.
Because it's classic.
Like any animal. Right. Because Michael Waddell did it on the VHS tapes that I watched when I was a little kid. So
it's just the noise you make. Yeah.
Exactly. Every once in a while, I'll growl to get their attention, but for some reason, I went to the mat, and he turned slightly quartering to us, which I really like, because at that point, you can shoot it in the front shoulder and still get back into the lungs. So now you're breaking a leg and getting into the airbags. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, he made a textbook first shot and just narrowly missed the front shoulder bone. I mean, he went through the muscle of the shoulder, like what would have been the front of the bicep, went back through the chest. I saw the little puff of smoke come out of right where he hit him. I knew it was a great shot. Normally, when you smoke a bear like that, they're going to do what a coyote does, and they're going to go into a death spin. And that's your chance. You pump them full of lead right there. And that's when you just tell them, keep shooting, keep shooting. And then usually when they take off, if they're still running, that's usually when I'll shoot. And this bear did not do that. It was boom, dead run immediately, which kind of surprised me. And so as a result of that, it sounded more like boom, boom, and my gun went off pretty soon, because we had a relatively narrow sight window before he was going to make it into the brush. So, and I go over that with every single client. I tell them, look, if it's out in the open and he's not close to the brush, then absolutely, you're going to do all the shooting. But if I think that he's got a decent chance of making it into the brush, I'm going to shoot, because that's my life insurance policy that my wife's going to have to cash in. So anyway, I shot him, client shot him again, I shot him again. I think all told, we ended up having like 5 or 6 rounds into this brown bear before he finally stopped. And the client shot the last couple of times. He finally took a dive. He fell into a little creek, took a roll, and then got back up. Client hit him again. He went back down, and then the client hit him one more time. And he actually clipped him right across the very back of the skull. Just because I have this one here, I'll just show you. It would be like if it hit it like right here. So just like where the brainstem is, which is obviously a showstopper. So, if you're familiar with the old Western Tombstone, where I think it's Kurt Russell that has the line, "I'll turn your head into a canoe." That's,
yep.
So we have that saying in bear camp, turn your head into a canoe. And you don't want to do that, but sometimes it happens, and at least it was the client and not me. But that finally put an end to the show, and the client did great. I am usually relatively unimpressed with hunters' abilities to shoot on the run, and it's just not something that we practice that much. And I think that that's really important. I noticed that my shooting on the run improved a lot when I did a little bit of skeet shooting, just practicing leading, just that moving motion and being able to follow through, and especially, torching off a rifle. It's not easy, and that client did an excellent job. And in the middle of all of that, his gun jammed, and when it jammed, he went to drop the floor plate, which then proceeded to expel his remaining rounds in the magazine onto the beach. So at that point, by the time we got to that point in the shooting, he was out, and the bear was down, but he was still trying to get up. So I have a little ammo carrier on the side of my bino harness. I've got something jerry-rigged on there that holds an extra 10 rounds. And as it happens, we were both shooting the same cartridge. And the same bullets, the same factory ammo. I was shooting factory loads last spring, which I haven't done much the last couple of years of, but I happened to be. and they were the same rounds, the same loads. So I handed him 3 more rounds out of mine, and then he finished off his bear with those last 2, and it all worked out great. And that bear ended up being in that low 9s range, and had I think it was 27 and change for a skull size. It was, yeah, it was a little over
Beautiful.
27,
And
which is a nice size bear.
and a good story to go
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, it was a great hunt. But that hunt to me is the spring hunt in a nutshell. The second round of hunts for the spring extends into June a bit further. So we hunt a different area that outfitter has the licensing for, and so we access that area a bit differently. There's some flying involved there, and some boating too. But yeah, so that there's a nice variety between first and second round. But yeah, it's a blast. It's a great camp. There's a lot of brown bears around. Some hunters do add on a black bear tag occasionally, but for the most part, we're there to kill brown bears. So yeah, I feel very blessed and fortunate to work with a group of guys like that, with that level of experience, and those kind of guys to learn from. And like I said, I've been doing it about a half a dozen years now, but every year, anytime that I get to spend with the other guides in base camp that have been there for a long time, you're just learning stuff from them, and you just try to take all that in. And yeah, I think it's a huge blessing to be able to spend time around grizzly veterans, we call them. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of fun
Absolutely.
though.
I mean, being a consummate student, right? As soon as you think you know
Hmm.
it all, you should probably just stay home.
Hmm.
So,
Yep,
and
and
that's
definitely my first couple of years, I probably should have been sent home, because I was at the peak of my intellect,
yeah.
and there are some situations that I have learned from, no doubt. I think we all have those stories, but
Mm, 'tis
yeah,
life.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you just pick yourself up and you move on. You learn from your
Yep.
mistakes, and everybody makes them. But yeah, I feel very very blessed to be able to work there. It's a lot of fun. It's a good group of
Yeah.
guys.
Man, one of my mentors on the SWAT team, he just retired from the team after like 20
Mm,
years, but he had a really good analogy
wow.
for this kind of thing, when it comes to being a consummate student is just that um, when you're new at something, and obviously he's referring a lot to police work and in a speech, his little going away speech the other night. But
Mm,
I think it just applies to just everything, right? And it probably very much applies to guiding, especially in Alaska, where the stakes can be higher in the Alaska wilderness and out here too. But up there is that you get to a point, you're just you're learning and everything's new and you're really excited, but then you get to a point where you've learned enough to where you kind of know what
right.
you're doing, and
Right.
that's where you kind of get stupid because you get a little cocky, and
Yes.
he called it that's being
Yes.
on mount you're on top of Mount Stupid. And then
Yep.
you have a few things that kind of knock you down a peg, and or if you're lucky and you survive long enough on top of Mount Stupid to get some experience, and then that experience, you start learning so much that you realize you don't know anything, right? So you think you know everything, and
Hmm.
then you learn enough to realize you don't know jack crap. And
Right.
that's when you come off of Mount Stupid. It's
Yeah.
like
I
yeah,
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm gonna have to use that. Hope there's not a copyright on that, because I will be using it.
perfect,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have. Yeah, I'm sure in a lot of ways I'm still camped on Mount Stupid.
Oh, I
Yeah, that's the dangerous thing though, and I'm glad you brought that up, and that I think that applies to any aspect of being outside here. Is right when you think you've got it is when you're going to make a dumb mistake, just an absent-minded thing that just slips your mind, and that has the chance to get you dead. And in reality, the water kills more people in Alaska than bears do. And especially with our hunts in the spring, so much being focused around the water for transportation. I grew up, my dad had a little raft with an outboard in Fiji that we would go out a few times a year on. I'd spent some time on the water, and then deer hunting. I started deer hunting in 2016 as well. In that first fall season, I started that, and I've gone every year but last year.
so I've
But
heard.
yeah, you've heard me gripe about that, have you? But yeah, so but that honestly, I did that before I was guiding for a handful of years, and that I think was extremely valuable because I learned a lot of things on the water doing that, just on low stress, tight areas, that's pretty much all small channels. You're not really exposed out on any big water. And you learn a lot. And being on the water scares me a lot more than a bear does. Obviously within reason, but a 375 is not going to solve your problems if you're stuck in the water and your boat's gone. And, a life jacket is just so they can find your body. If you go in the water and you stay there for a while, your chances of getting out, if you're out in the big water, is slim to none. You're going to die of hypothermia before anybody gets to you. But, you learn to do simple things like keep your inReach in your pocket all the time. I never run a boat without having my little shut-off tether around my wrist. That does not come off. If I'm in a boat, I don't care if I'm just going from shore out to the bigger boat to help them deep water anchor to then bring the other guy back to shore at base camp. I've got the tether around my wrist most of the time. And if I don't, I'm thinking about it like I should probably do this. Like it's always there. And for me, I'm not a great swimmer. I did not grow up doing that much swimming, which surprises most people because they think, South Pacific, warm water. Why ain't you a good swimmer? We weren't there to be at the beach. So we were not in the water all that often. And so I know how to float, but that's not going to get me off the bottom and when I'm in hip boots. So I wear a life jacket because I'm not confident enough in myself to stay floating long enough that I'll be able to get back in a raft if I do fall out. So, people, you can drown in 6 feet of water real easy if you don't know how to swim.
Yep.
So
well, I could tell you on the water thing, man. I mean, well, one, you're just being smart, but, I'm fairly confident in my swimming abilities, but rivers is what kind of scares me. And I spend a lot of time on rivers. We do hunts on some of our bigger Idaho rivers, my buddies and I. I do drift boat fishing and all that stuff. And
sure.
But they intimidate me, man. There's just nothing to me that's more scary than like getting caught up in a recycler that won't spit you out. But even too in the wintertime here, I remember a few years ago, I brought my kayak duck hunting and I just like, oh, this would be cool, man. Cause we don't have a dog and we're not like super into waterfowl hunting, but it's something to do in the wintertime, before the bays or the creeks ice up. And so brought out there and I look across the lake, and this is just here in town. I live in North Idaho in Coeur d'Alene. And so for the listeners, most people probably familiar with Coeur d'Alene because it's blown up in popularity, but we have a giant lake. And I look across the lake, at least this bay that I was in, and I see a whole bunch of geese, and I'd never shot a goose. And I was like, man, I kind of want to go over there and get me a goose. And without even thinking, throw grandpa's shotgun in between my legs, jump in my kayak, and I start paddling. And I'm in neoprene chest waders, start paddling. Well, I get out and I'm breaking some thin ice that had kind of formed overnight on the lake and nothing crazy, real clear, just super thin crust. And it dawns on me, the geese, I get kind of close to them and they're on shore. So my plan is they're not going to fly into the trees. The only way they're going to be able to fly is back over me. So I'll shoot them when they spook and fly over me. That works out. Okay. Like here they are, the geese bust. I lift up my gun and I shoot, bam, shoot another goose. And I almost like, as I'm twisting and shooting, rock my boat over and almost like kind of not too close to tipping, but realized I was like, oh, there's a chance I could fall into the water. And all of a sudden it just dawned on me how absolutely stupid I had been going out there in my kayak. It's like 12 degrees in chest waders. If I fall out of my kayak, I'm going to the bottom of the daggone lake. Like with my luck, those freaking things aren't going to come off my feet, right? They're going to fill up with water. So I changed my system for kayak duck hunting after that.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I didn't have to learn by actually falling but it kind of spooked me. I was like, man, that was really stupid. Really stupid. So don't screw around with the water.
Better to learn from your mistakes and live to talk about it. And I have taken I've been the brunt of some jokes for wearing the life jacket, but I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. I have thicker skin than that.
Yeah. And you're here. And your wife probably appreciates that. Before we get started, I want to thank our first partner, Response Ready Medical. Response Ready Medical, bringing our customers the best quality training and equipment for the worst case scenario. Response Ready Medical's vision is to be the leading provider of emergency preparedness solutions across the United States, empowering communities, organizations, and individuals to respond confidently and preserve life during critical moments. Offering same-day certification, all response-ready medical classes are instructed by nationally registered and state-licensed firefighter, paramedics, law enforcement officers, and hospital staff. Classes currently being offered by Response Ready Medical include CPR and AED, CPR, AED, and first aid, emergency trauma care, child and babysitting safety, CABS, backcountry medicine, and wilderness first aid. Your premium partner in emergency preparedness, Response Ready Medical. Just real quick, I'm just curious. I think I know what the answer is just from listening to you, but for the listeners, without going into like a whole bunch of debate, because I know it can, and I don't think I have to worry about that with you anyways. But say just rifle shooting, black bears, and then grizzlies. One for each. If you don't prefer the same for both, what caliber rifles do you like to use, and what would you tell a client to bring on a brown bear hunt?
I kind of figured you were going to ask that. I was trying to think back earlier today while I was at work about the different cartridges that I've seen clients show up with between my own clients and other guides' clients that I've met, because you'll be in a base camp and at times there'll be a half a dozen or up to 10 guys in another camp that I worked at years ago. I guided actually the last season that a senior outfitter that has been running hunts up here since the 70s, I believe. And that was his last year of working. And so I got to guide there the last fall they operated. And that was an absolute riot. So I always try to pay attention to what clients are bringing. I'll just ask them just in small talk, like, hey, and everybody loves to talk about their gear, right? A client shows up and they're always going to shoot their gun and check that it is still zeroed from travel, which that's a whole different topic. For the most part, all of my personal clients, I think I've had a couple. I think I've had two guys with 338s, and all of the rest of them have been 375s that have been my hunters that I've personally guided over the last 6 years that I've been doing it. As a rule, that outfitter that I guide for every year in the spring likes to see something 338 or bigger. There have been, I think one guy that my buddy guided that had a 300 Win Mag. That's what he showed up with, and he ended up shooting an absolute slob of a brown bear, just an absolute giant head size. It was huge, just massive skull. Well into the 29. I think it was high 29-inch range. Which is, if I get to kill one of those in my guiding career over 29, that's an accomplishment. That's an absolute giant of a brown bear. So, but for the most part, it seems like the lion's share of hunters show up with either a 375 H&H or a 338 Win Mag. And that's for many reasons. I think ammunition availability is a big part of it. For a lot of these guys, this is their one and done chance to try to go brown bear hunting. It's not like it's so affordable that they're going to come back time and time again. Although there are those guys, there are several repeat clients that we have, but for the most part, a lot of these guys, this is their chance. They've been saving money for a long time, or they've waited until they retire. And so the brown bear hunt is like a bucket list thing. So they're doing a brown bear hunt, they're doing a moose hunt some other time, then they're going to try to go to Africa, maybe shoot a Cape buffalo. And I've had that story many times. So they want to buy a gun that's practical, that they could take to more than one place. And so a 338, I think, is one of the best all-around larger cartridges that you could have in North America, especially for the Alaska conversation. Just the variety and bullet weights that you can get and the availability of factory ammo is pretty awesome. And you have some reach there with a 338. So you could take a 338 moose hunting or goat hunting, or caribou hunting for that matter, and you can shoot out to 400, 500 yards if you really want to. 375 H&H is a lot more limited for distance unless you are shooting 250 grain class bullets. And even then, your selection is pretty slim. If you hand load, then it's great. Then you can load all the way down to like a 235 grain bullet, and you can hop that thing up to 3,000 plus feet a second. And at that point, even with a 250 or a 270 grain that's hand loaded to higher pressures than most factory ammo, you can stretch a 375 with the right bullet out to 350, 400 pretty easy. But it's the right bullet construction. Most bullets that are sold for 375s are flat based, and they're not built with much aerodynamics involved. They're built to get out to about 200 yards or less, and that's fine, And the average muzzle velocity of a 300 grain bullet out of an H&H is about 2550 or 25 even, and I've seen some that are as low as 2450. So muzzle velocity is very, very moderate, and you can certainly achieve an extra 100 feet a second in some cases with the same weight bullets if you hand load. So my preference for brown bears, I would say, is a 375 H&A. It's easy to get ammo for. It's relatively easy to shoot. If somebody has like that bucket list idea where they want to do a brown bear hunt and they might want to take a gun to Africa to shoot something with it, if you want to bring your own gun, or if you want to do more than one brown bear hunt, then a 375 H&H is an easy gun to get if you want to shoot something bigger. I think a 338 Win Mag kicks a bit more than a 375 does. I think that has a lot to do with the case geometry, and there's just a lot more of a sharp feeling to the recoil of a 338 Win Mag as related to the 375 H&H. So if it comes down to recoil, I would probably push somebody to a 375 H&H before a 338 Win Mag. But that being said, if you don't have a big caliber gun and you don't necessarily think that you're going to do more than one hunt for this type of species, and you have a 300 Win Mag, don't worry about it. Just shoot your 300 Win Mag. I would rather somebody show up with a gun they've practiced with that's maybe a bit smaller than I would like, but they know how to shoot it. They know how to run the action. They know how to not short stroke it under a high stress situation, which I had a client a couple of years ago short stroke a control feed Model 70 rifle. They're not jam proof. A control feed action is slightly more jam proof than a push feed, but you still have to do your part. And he did manage to double feed his Model 70, and that resulted in him only getting one bullet in his brown bear before I shot it and had to put it down. And that was very frustrating to him that he jammed his gun, but it happens. So the familiarity within reason is more important than the caliber size. And then shot placement is the next most important thing. I already mentioned that earlier, killing them with the first shot. Mo and I have some things planned as we get closer to spring here, similar to what you're doing as far as a bear theme to things. So we have some topics sprinkled in here and there that are in the works that relate to what we're doing. So, but in there is going to be some conversation about shot placement. And if you put a premium hunting grade bullet in the lungs of a brown bear at a reasonable distance, there isn't a brown bear on the planet that's going to survive. It might not have the same visual effect as a 375 does, or a 416, or even a 338. You're not going to notice usually as much of a visible reaction. There's a saying that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt that's in the shooting industry, and that's there's no replacement for displacement. And you can get way too carried away with that ideology.
Absolutely.
To the point that, that you think that you need a 416 Remington to kill anything in North America, and that's just not true. But you read some of these threads online and you'll start believing that. But I don't need to tell you, I'm sure, like I said earlier, about your SWAT training, you know a lot about terminal ballistics, and the disruption of vital function is the goal that causes death. You can accomplish that with a 30 caliber round. Bullet selection, I wouldn't recommend something that's really soft, but at the same time, a classic Nosler partition or a Nosler AccuBond, or the first brown bear I was ever in on killing as a packer, I wasn't the lead guide on it, but the client was shooting a 338 Win Mag with cheap Remington core locked ammo. And that does not matter when you're at 50 yards on a broadside shot, because that's how far the shot was. It didn't matter what kind of bullet that was. It was enough. There was enough mass. The bullet expanded beautifully. I think I still have one of those bullets in here somewhere. And it flattened that bear. Flattened it. That's because that bullet sheds a little bit of weight and expands really big. So there's a lot more to be said for projectile choice than almost there is about caliber selection to begin with. Now, it's a totally different thing for a guide's rifle. Completely different conversation. If you don't have a 338 or larger as a guide, then I would probably wager to say that you haven't been charged that often, or you haven't had to shoot one 10 yards in front of you that's on the full charge. That story that I referenced earlier happened to me, where a client that I was with shot a bear. It's the biggest bear that I've been a part of killing. It was 10-4 or 10-5, I think, squared, and it was 28 and 5/8 skull, I believe.
Oof.
It was at least 28 and a half, but it was huge.
Tank.
But that bear was walking right along the brush line, right up against the trees. Boom, client shoots. Bear doesn't react, goes in the trees. We can see him limber up, hump up a little bit, raises that arm, and just steps into the trees. Gone. No time for a follow-up shot, zero. And he's just disappeared into the alders and the big trees. So I left the client with the other guide that was there, and I went into the brush after the bear. And I had my 375 Ruger with me at that point, and it was an alder tunnel about 4 feet tall, and I'm over 6 foot. So I'm hunched down. And at one point I got down on my hands and knees, and I'm just kind of following his tracks in there. And I knew what that hillside looked like inside the trees. And I knew that if he held up a little bit before he crossed the next rise, I could get on him and shoot him and stop him from getting any further in. And that's what happened. And I got into the brush, and I could hear him kind of wheezing a little bit. And so I figured, well, we at least got one lung with that bullet. But the shot looked like it was far forward, and it was, and it had broken that front leg, but he was slightly quartered away. So it didn't go back into the lungs at all. And what happened was that bone fragmented here and kind of shotgunned into the lungs, and it did collapse that first lung, I think, just the first one. Because he had some blood coming out of his nose, but he was still breathing quite easily. He wasn't, not to be too graphic, but I don't think we have to worry about this here. He wasn't choking on his own blood yet. And when you shoot him in the lungs, that does not take long to have that happen at all. So I went in there, and then he turned and heard me coming through the brush. And from my knees, I rose up a little bit, and at that point, I had a 2.5 to 8 power scope, and at 2.5 power at 10 or 15 yards, whatever it was, the glass was pointless. So I just kind of looked down the side of the gun and pointed it at him and shot. And he dropped on his face, at which point I jumped up and got up on top of a stump on the side of him, because, anybody who's hunted much in the way of somewhat dangerous animals knows that when you get charged, you shoot. When they go on their face, you move. And they teach you that in a lot of other things in life too. Shoot and move, shoot and move. Don't make yourself a stationary target. So I got up on top of that stump on the side of him, shot him again, and that, kept him down. Having enough gun, that's another saying that gets thrown around almost too frequently, I think. But for a guide's sake, it applies in this scenario. I wouldn't have wanted to do that with a 300 Win Mag. It might have worked, but it might not have. So I don't want to find out. And I know
Fair.
a 375 works, so I'm going to keep using that. The last spring I got it with my H&H, but I have a couple of H&Hs, and I have a Ruger as well. It's a very similar case. They'll shoot the same bullets. My Ruger is a 20-inch barrel, whereas my H&H that I like is a 24-inch barrel. So there is a velocity discrepancy there. But because the Ruger has a 6% higher case capacity, any velocity that I would have gained over an H&H with the same length barrel, I lose by cutting 4 inches off that Ruger's barrel.
Right.
So velocities are about the same. On a bear, they're not going to know the difference. Doesn't matter. So yeah, bullets at that point, just pick a good bullet. But I'm a big fan of a 375. But for black bears, man, over bait, 243, baby. That'd be awesome.
Nice.
I've never shot a black bear over bait with a 243, but I probably should have. I've killed a couple with a couple different 375s just for fun. At one point, I shot one with a frontal shot down through the top of the back with a really soft 375 bullet just to see if it would go all the way through, and it didn't. I found it down in the rear end underneath the skin. And at one point earlier on, I was using a 375 H&H when I was a teenager just because I thought that's what you wanted at a bear bait, And I'd had a couple of run-ins with some grizzly bears that had, kind of bluffed their way into intimidation, I guess, with me as a new bear hunter. So I thought I'll just carry my 375 everywhere. So I did, and I shot a couple of black bears, and it works quite well, but it's way more gun than you ever needed a bear bait. And interior grizzly bears, you already mentioned that the size difference between a coastal brown bear and interior
Right.
grizzly bear, they're wired the same. I mean, genetically, I think it's the same animal.
Yep.
Grizzly bears are just a lot smaller because they hibernate for a lot longer. Their growing cycle is a lot shorter. So they're asleep for 5, 6 months out of the year sometimes, and at least 4 or 5 in most areas in the interior. And when they get out, a lot of interior grizzly bears are not eating salmon, so they don't have a great diet. It's a starvation diet. They're going between blueberries and whatever other kind of berries they can find, or ground squirrels, or roots and grass and plants, or if they can take down and kill a moose calf or a caribou calf. So they're a lot smaller, just body size. Interior grizzly bears, I mean, well, you mentioned Tyler Friel earlier. He shot a grizzly bear with a 6.5 Creedmoor just to send the internet into a rage a few years ago.
Yep. Success
And
too.
yeah, oh yeah, 100% it was. It was a great success. But you know, he's one of those guys that likes to shoot things with different rounds too, and that's great. Last year he shot a couple, I think, with a 22 ARC black bears. I think the new twos are great. Low recoil, minimal cost as far as reloading goes. It doesn't eat up a lot of powder. They're easy to practice with, easy to shoot, and if you're baiting, it's point blank shooting, man. It's usually 30 yards or less. I mean, I guess if you're dedicated rifle bear baiting, you could set one up that's 50 or 60 yards away, but then you're losing some of that tight cover feeling. Depending on where you're at, I wouldn't even do that. If it was me, I would still set them up close just for the fun of it. It's fun to be close.
Yep.
But yeah, anything will work. I'm sure anybody that has seen our podcast has seen this gun sitting in the corner. This is the gun that I carry. This is the one that I carry into a bear bait. This is the 16-inch barreled Marlin Trapper 4570. This is just the medicine gun. If I need to shoot one that happens to be charging or on a tracking job and it's not dead and it gets up and it needs to be shot, that's what that gun's for. It's not necessary. I don't carry it because I think the 4570 is a big, powerful stopping cartridge. It works, sure, it does do that, but that's not why I carry it. I carry it because it's skinny, it's short, it fits 6 rounds at once with one in the chamber, and it's a lever action, so it's fast. That's why I carry it. I don't carry it because of any other reason. You could do the same thing with a 30-30 and you'd probably be just as fine. So I don't know. There's so many rabbit holes to get in with cartridges. I think black bears, anything you'd shoot a whitetail with, as long as it's legal, anything you'd kill a whitetail with will kill a black bear with ease. 223 even. I've got buddies that have shot them with 223s. So shoot them in the right spot, man. If an arrow can do it, a bullet can.
Hey, everybody. I just want to take a quick break to thank you for listening to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast. And to thank you today, I want to offer you a discount at 360 Sportsman. Head over to 360sportsman.org now and use promo code PF15. That is PF15 to get 15% off your subscription to any of their master classes listed on the website. You can learn anything over there to improve your skills at hunting, fishing, trapping, snowmobiling. There's going to be first aid classes up there. They've got all kinds of stuff. There's even a how to build a house class coming. So anything you want to learn related to the outdoors or just making yourself a more knowledgeable human being, head over to 360sportsman.org. Use promo code PF to get 15% off any of their master classes. Want to thank you for listening to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, and we'll get back to the show. Yeah, that's kind of, I go back to that all the time. The first bear I shot was with an arrow, so I tend to be a little bit more confident with rounds, but just out of what I have, I tend to have bigger caliber guns that I take kind of, I've got a 308, which isn't a big caliber by any means, but I've very successfully killed bears with that.
Oh yeah. It's a great round for bears.
My favorite hunting round, and not because I'm with you, I don't do it because I think it's enough gun or whatever the excuse. I just like the round. The gun I bought it in shoots well. I did buy it for my trip to Alaska just because I asked some buddies up there. They were like, I asked, what should I get for coming up there when I go caribou hunting? And they're like, not for the caribou, but just don't have anything less than a 300 Win Mag. So I ended up getting a 300 Win Mag, and that just turned into my favorite hunting rifle. It's just a nice shooting rifle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And gets the job done.
Yeah.
Absolutely smoked a bear with that. Last bear I shot was with the only one I've shot with anything over 308, and it was did a good job, obviously. But I like the
Yeah.
200 grain terminal ascents is the my bullet of
Yeah,
choice
man.
for
Yeah,
it's.
absolutely. Did you watch that episode that we did by chance talking about bullets that we did a
I
while
don't do a
back?
lot of just like actually you just mentioned this in your recent episode, and I've talked about it on my show too. Is I don't watch a lot of podcasts. I listen to them when I drive.
Okay.
So I'm in that very much in that I
Yeah.
think you said like
Yeah.
99% of your audience listens to it, and that's where I'm at. I'm a
Yeah.
listener. So in a
Yeah.
typically like you listen to the Meat Eater podcast and they're like, all right, we're gonna show all the stuff off. I'm like, dang, maybe I'll go back
Yeah.
to YouTube and watch, but yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't
Yeah.
watch it. I've just listened.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything that's worth going back and watching on our show, it's that bullets episode. That one, I've got a Ziploc bag. I'm looking at it right now that is full of bullets that I've recovered. And just for your own sake, I'll grab it because I'm looking at it right now. Why not? But I shot the last moose I killed 2 falls ago. I shot with my Tika 300 Win Mag, and I shot those 200 grain terminal ascents because I was just too curious. Even though we do work with hammer bullets on a official level, I still like to tinker. And I told Steve that when we started working with him a long time ago. I said, I'm still going to tinker. And that means when I'm curious about something and I want to try to catch it in an animal, I'm going to try to, even if it's not a hammer bullet. And he understands. He's the same way. But this is, get this to show up here. This is the front of one of those terminal ascents. I mean, you can't get a more box photo perfect version of an expanded bullet. And that moose
Absolutely.
got shot. That moose got shot 3 times, 2 by me and one by my buddy that was shooting the same rounds. But yeah, they did awesome. They very high weight retention, but good penetration. You know, obviously great expansion. So I think those are great rounds for what they are. I really like that hybridized design of that solid copper rear end with a bonded lead core in the front. I know there's been some accuracy issues that guys have had with them balancing in different guns, but I mean, what bullet isn't like that? But
Right.
as
Well, and
far as
sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
every gun shoots, you find the bullet that works best in your rifle, and I shoot the same thing. I shoot a Tika that shoot that 300 Win Mag through in it, and it shoots lights out. I'm very confident with
Yeah,
that gun past 400 yards.
yeah,
I took the
yeah.
mule deer that's hanging up right there
Mm-hmm.
at 315, quarter two shot across the canyon, and man, I drilled. It was one shot and drilled that deer through his shoulder knuckle, and did not recover the bullet. Clean pass through, man. Like not
Oh
even
yeah,
a sliver of it did I
yeah.
find in
Not
that mule
surprised.
deer. And mule
Not
deer,
surprised.
for listeners that haven't hunted mule deer, a mature mule deer buck is not anything like a whitetail. They're a different, more sturdy beast. Um,
Yeah.
as far as size. And then, gosh, man, that bear that I shot was a decent sized black bear boar. He was on the move, and we had kind of spotted him. We were walking along a logging road. It was me and a
Mm-hmm.
buddy, and we were actually, when we were guiding, and a client was with another guide, and my buddy and I had some time. We're like, hey, let's just go out for the day together and see what we can
Mm-hmm.
turn up. And we'd seen this bear right at the end of the day. I mean, getting pretty close to dark, and he was coming up in a clear cut, and it's kind of like we sensed each other, and he just didn't spook, but he turned around and walked off, and he was about 200 yards
Mm-hmm.
away, and he wasn't moving quick. But I had like one fleeting opportunity as he was downhill. So kind of like, going this way away from me. So I had a clean shot at the top of his back at about 200
Yeah.
yards. And I was like, man, I think if I just put this at the right angle, I'll punch through the middle of
Mm-hmm.
his liver and catch one of his lungs on the way out. And that's exactly what that bullet did. It went through the liver, through a lung, and out a shoulder, nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And that bear was DRT.
Yeah. 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 That I wouldn't imagine that there was many black bears that you're going to catch one of those bullets in out of a 300 Win Mag, especially 200 grains.
Yep. Yeah.
But black bears are not that hard to get really good penetration unless you're shooting a bullet that absolutely parachutes, like I mentioned
Yep.
earlier. But yeah, I mean, it all works. You know, the fun part about brown bear hunting, especially, is that there is that desire for that dangerous aspect, right? Like there's always that in the back of your mind that if things go a certain way, it could be this. And even though, we don't want to be in that situation, we all kind of do a little bit. And
Yeah.
that's the edge that we like to ride. But it's fun. I think it's the same reason that anybody hunts Cape buffalo. It's a fun rush. There's something about that, and that's really the only thing that we have in North America that'll do that. But in reality, it doesn't happen that often. I've only had to shoot the one brown bear that I can think of. Yeah, the one that was that close that was coming in. So everything else is usually a shooting frenzy from a distance, and they do the coyote spin. And when the client runs out, or if the bear's close to the brush, then I get to start shooting, and that's kind of fun. But it's for the guiding aspect, it's nice to have that larger caliber, and that there is no denying the fact that when you hit a big bear with a bigger round, they notice it, and it tends to slow them down, even if it doesn't necessarily drop them. And actually, this is a good time to bring this up. I listen to a fair amount of podcasts. I work, like I said, in the trades, and um, I have a lot of jobs where I can listen to something through my Bluetooth earbuds. So I consume an enormous amount of media, whether it's podcasts or audiobooks. I've usually always got something playing. And some days I can get more hours in than others of listening. But I think it's a great way to educate yourself on different topics. I enjoy
Absolutely.
a wide variety of things. Things that you'd usually, that 20 years ago, you'd have to read a book to learn this kind of stuff. And now you can just absorb it while you're working. And I think that's excellent. That's a great wealth of information out there. A lot of garbage too, but that comes with the territory. I think it's really interesting, the thought process behind what makes an animal drop in their tracks. And if I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast or not, really started out as a YouTube channel, but Buffalo Bore, they make ammunition, and Tim Sundles,
Right here.
I can't quite. Oh, yeah, yep. Box of handgun ammo. Yep, there you go. So Tim Sundles and his wife have had a YouTube channel out for a little over a year now, and they got a podcast version out too. And just today, at the time of this recording, they dropped an episode that is a conversation with them and the friend of theirs who's over in Africa with them on Tim's property right now to hunt, and their guest is a neurosurgeon, and he is a big time hunter. And so the topic of this particular episode is going to be what causes an animal to drop or not to drop. Because sometimes, and this happens with anything, sometimes you'll shoot an animal and it just boom goes immediately down. You'll shoot the exact same kind of animal, exact same size, same build, same shot placement, same gun, same bullet, same distance. Another time, boom, and then they take off running. What causes that? So I'm sure there's no definitive reason why, but I'm sure there's more of a reason than I understand right now. And I'm curious about that. And so apparently that latest episode from them, their interview with their surgeon friend, is going to talk about that. And that's on my listening list for tomorrow at work. I'm very intrigued by that topic because that I have observed many a times with bears. I have personally been a part of killing, whether it's me shooting or a client or my wife or my brother-in-law. I've been a part of well north of 30 bears that have been killed in the last 10 years. And there's a huge variety of reactions. And I've tried to think about that, like what causes them to die this fast versus this long. And sometimes it's just 1,000, 1,000, and there's a death mode. Other times it's crash, 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 and you hear them run away until you can't hear them anymore. And the shot was the exact same as you shot the last bear with. So what's different? I think that subject is extremely interesting. That there's no doubting the fact that one way to compensate for that is to shoot a bigger gun.
Yeah.
Shoot a larger caliber, and you will produce a slightly faster result in some scenarios. But just because you buy a 375 doesn't mean that it's going to be a one-shot kill on a big brown bear. That's not how it works. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry to get off on that rabbit trail.
No,
I think stuff like that's really interesting.
it is a super fascinating, and I think I'll probably be looking for that one as well after I finish up. Is actually right now I'm partway through your second part with the fella
Oh,
from
with
Peaks.
Kayam?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's fun to listen to.
yeah. He's a funny dude, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the heck out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd probably listen to that. I think it's the same thing too. Like with elk here, a big mature bull elk is a tough critter. And
Yeah.
sometimes you flatten them out and sometimes they take off running. Sometimes it takes a few shots.
Yeah.
And it's even just little white-tailed deer, man.
Oh yeah.
I put one of these 200, I've put a few of these 200 grain,
Yeah.
300 Win Mags in some whitetails just because it's my go-to hunting rifle, these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
I'll take a smaller rifle out occasionally. It all just depends on the situation. But if I think I'm going to have some range, it's my most accurate rifle at distance. And man, I've flattened some whitetails with that 200 grain bullet. But then I shot a white-tailed doe back in October, and she
It's
didn't go
always the
far.
does, isn't it?
But I was like, she's going to fold. This, no doubt, man, this doe's going to flop right over. She's just going to fold. And she took off running. And man, it was like the most annoying terrain because what I couldn't see from where I was is that where she went running, it does these rolling dips. And it's all, it's an old clear cut. So it's all brushy and then surrounded by timber. And I was like, oh man, like I walked over there, no blood trail. Like zero blood. And it just took me, like, I was like, well, I guess I'll just start doing the big circles. And I did a big half circle. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to where I think she was standing and try a smaller circle until I turn up some blood. And I found her on the way back to the starting point. She dove down into one of those little ditches. And the only blood trail, I tried trailing her backwards from where she lay. It was only about 10 feet, worth of blood. She didn't, no good blood trail for a while. So man, that's a great topic because it's super interesting. Why does this white-tailed doe soak up that big round and barely bleed until the last second?
Right.
I don't know.
I've had the exact same thing happen with blacktails up here. I said that I've been deer hunting up here 10 trips over the last 10 years, only because I missed last year and I went twice 2 years before that. So I made up for it. I just didn't realize it yet. But in 10 trips, we have piled up the deer numbers with us that go there. And it's the craziest thing. I have shot deer with a 7 mag in my earlier years. And then my buddy at the time was shooting a 300 Win Mag. Mo, his first couple trips was the 300 short mag. And some of them, you just absolutely flatten them. It's like, man, I almost feel bad. Like this is way too much gun. Other times you shoot them a perfect one shot and zoom, they're gone. And what really is hard about blacktails is it's usually raining when you're shooting them. Usually. It always rains in southeast Alaska. I mean, just picture Seattle, but further north. It's always raining there. And so the blood trailing, I mean, you shoot and you better be on it now. I mean, there ain't no sitting around, let's give him 20 minutes to lay down and die. No, I shoot it and it runs off and I'm running right after it. I mean, it's helter skelter because you might not find it. Plus those blacktails, I mean, a big buck maybe would push 180, 200 pounds, maybe, but by and large, they're 150 for a nice mature buck. It's a big forky, which is the prominent genetic where we get it. It's the craziest thing. And then, you shoot it with a 180 grain .6 bullet going 2,700 and you shoot it at 200 yards and you think if it's ever going to run, it's going to be now. But, your impact velocity is like 2,500 feet a second and it just goes out, lights out, like I got hit by lightning, just gone. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's a very interesting topic. I think there's a lot to be learned there on my end. I'm very curious to do some more research into that. But that being said, I keep going smaller with my deer rifles, and so does Mo. My next deer trip that I'm going to make at the end of this year in the fall time, I'm taking my 25-06 that I got last year. I haven't had a chance to shoot anything with it yet, but it's a nice, fast little cartridge. I'm going to load up some hammer bullets in it. And I'm excited for that. I think that'll be a great little deer round and less meat damage, but still, plenty good medicine for deer. But
yeah,
that's it's interesting.
I love my 300 and I like my other rifles. Yeah, a lot of times if I'm going to be hunting not at super crazy distance, not that it can't reach out, it's just that rifle I'm not the most confident at distance with. My wife, I bought her like a youth model 7mm 08 Ruger American, and her and I went up and killed a cow elk with that big mature cow. 2 bullets. I've told the story, I think, on the podcast before, but we snuck in. I mean, like timber snuck on our hands and knees into this cow elk at like 30 yards. And I
Hmm.
mean, we're not shooting the best elk rounds out of that bullet. I'll admit that right now. We're shooting like 150 grain American whitetail. They're just like cup and core lead tip bullets.
Interlocks.
And we get in like 30 yards and like we're trying to pick. There's a whole bunch of elk in the timber, and it's like, all right, like, don't shoot right now because if a bullet passes through, which it might not, it's small, but if it passes through, it's gonna be a bad deal. But eventually, they kind of caught on to us that we were there, and that herd just kind of separated and made just a perfect opportunity on this big cow. So she shoots high shoulder. Cow does like
Mm.
this U-turn and stops and perfect, and I just grabbed the rifle and I'm like, let me finish this thing. And so, because she
Hmm.
was excited, it was her first elk, and we were in close, so shot it again, and then it dropped right there. But I really like that little 7 MMOA. The whole reason I bring that up is because as often as I can, it's like my favorite timber gun for shooting deer. It's lightweight, super wieldy, perfect like that caliber is great, little caliber.
Beautiful. Yeah.
But
I,
I'm
I think
looking
the
for
708. Yeah.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Listen, I'm looking
Oh,
for like a mountain, lighter weight, lighter caliber mountain rifle for like my mule deer hunts, or
yeah.
my hopeful someday goat hunts and stuff like that. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that 708 does not get enough love. It's obviously a bit aged at this point, and there's a lot newer, racier calibers out there, or cartridges, I should say. But, the benefit of a 708 in shooting a heavier bullet like that 150, even though it is what we would call not a premium bullet, that American whitetail is an interlock bullet, unless there's a different one that I don't know about that they're loading in that.
at least
But
they have that.
um, all of the American whitetail ammo that I've ever seen is the interlock bullet, which is just a standard cup and core, non-bonded lead core with a simple jacket bullet. And the problem is, if you were to shoot that 150 grain interlock out of a 7 Rem mag at 3150, that would be a lot poorer choice for elk. And you might think, well, no, it's in a bigger case, so it's going to go faster, which is a lot better. It's actually the opposite, because that increased velocity is going to just tear that bullet apart after impact, and it's
Mhm.
not going to penetrate as well. So with that reduced velocity of a 708, it's actually better, because that bullet is going to hold together a whole lot better, and it's going to penetrate a lot deeper than it will with a lot higher velocity. So I don't think it's a bad choice at all.
Yeah, it was, and it did good, and it's a short barrel, so it lose a little
Hmm.
velocity there, and
Sure.
ended up
Sure.
recovering the shanks and the hide on off both sides because the elk took a round from the opposite side because of the U-turn. So we ended up, but in the hide on each side, did recover the bullet. I learned that lesson too with shooting point blank and with the wrong ammo. I can't remember, it was a burger. I can't remember which
Mm,
exact bullet, but I shot a burger bullet out of my 308 at a bull. It was actually in a tree stand, and it was like maybe a 30-yard shot. That shot him in the shoulder with that, and that bullet just absolutely disintegrated. There was
yeah.
nothing left of that bullet, and I'm just lucky that elk died. I mean, he did drop right there and die, but I mean, his lungs were peppered. There was no one single hole through the lungs.
Yeah.
So
Burgers make burger. That's what we say.
yeah, yeah. Last animal I'd be shooting, at least that close. But that was not a great choice. That was one of those days, that was actually the animal that got me really paying attention to bullet construction, was that that incident. Yeah, because it was kind of a mess, obviously. And
Hmm.
like I said, I just got lucky that elk died right there. But I wanted him to die right there because he was just going to take off down a crazy, stupid, steep mountain and be a big pain in the ass. He died right by the trail, so that worked out good. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
man. No, you could dive into the bullet construction, and I think you're spot on. I think you kind of said it earlier. Bullet construction and choice is almost more important than what caliber you're shooting, right? And you said
Absolutely.
so. I think I like that conversation more than when people get into the caliber battles. I'm more interested in like, well, what bullet are you putting in that caliber?
Exactly. Man, I remember when I was younger and a lot newer to this whole thing, I was on the Facebook forums, and every single picture that someone would put up that they shot something with up here, I would always ask, what caliber, what bullet? And in my mind, that was just building numbers. Okay, this guy did this with this. And then every once in a while, I would get somebody that would actually comment on it and they would say, this is what I used, but this is what it did and didn't do well. And I actually interacted with a lot of people that I'm sure I came across as just an ignorant, dumb kid, because I was, but I was learning, and, probably a lot of information that's just supplementary and really unnecessary, honestly. But it helped build kind of a baseline knowledge for bullet performance and terminal performance, and to the point now where Mo and I work with hammer bullets. I already said that, and I think that hybridized design of having the petals come off of the shank and then leaving behind the shank to continue to penetrate straight through the animal, and then those petals go off and do their own thing, I think that is really, really advantageous. That's what's left of a hammer bullet when the petals come off. That's the shank. And the petals, I have a few petals here. They're going to be too small to see, as opposed to something like these are, like this one here is a Barnes bullet where the petals stay on. And that's a 30-06 from a 180 grain bullet. That it retains all of its weight. In theory, can penetrate deeper with the retained momentum. But I don't know that that's completely true. I think that because it retains that much surface area, in some cases, it will actually stop that bullet from making it as deeply as if those petals just come off. And if you shoot a Barnes bullet fast enough at a close enough distance on impact, those petals will come off and it'll do what a hammer bullet does. But you need serious velocity to pull that off.
Yeah.
It's a little bit easier to do with the LRX line because they're a little bit softer, meant to expand at lower impact velocities for long range. But the hammer bullets do that no matter what. And I really, really like those hammer bullets. Mo and I have shot a ton of stuff with them in the last several years that we've been working with them. We worked with them just because I found them on a podcast somewhere, and I called the owner up and we started talking and we became friends, and we really, really like those bullets. But that being said, there are other copper bullets out there that are built similarly to a hammer bullet.
Right.
Everybody likes to argue about who invented it first. I don't care. I have hammers. I like the guys that own hammer. I shoot hammers. It doesn't matter to me who invented the theory of it first. But the other companies would be like the controlled chaos bullets or the controlled fracturing bullets from Lehigh Defense. They make those similar style bullets. Maguire, I think it's called Maguire Ballistics. If you just look them up online, just look up Maguire bullets. They're making a bunch of copper bullets very similarly to that. Great terminal performance. And I think that's kind of the main three the three companies that I know that are making these on a large scale. I wouldn't be surprised if the copper bullet trend goes to this more hybrid, kind of an explosive after entry, petals come off, but that shank zips and continues to go on through. It's fantastic on bears. Fantastic. And anything else that we've shot them with too. But big bears, I mean, it is a noticeable impact difference between shooting a hammer bullet and something like a Barnes bullet. Barnes bullets work fine. I shot those last year in the spring because I didn't have any hand loads for that gun worked up. That's a whole other thing. But Barnes bullets work just fine. And I've killed a ton of stuff with a bunch of different bullets. But if I have my perfect way, I'm going to hand load those hammer bullets every time.
Deal. I like it, man. Oh, I guess we're pushing about 3 hours almost.
Yeah, I better let you get to bed there, buddy.
Hey, well, not a big deal. I've really enjoyed the heck out of this conversation. I'm just sitting here, I'm like, man, I could keep going. It's been really good to talk to you. Appreciate the heck out of the information. If you want to real quick, just give a good plug for your podcast, because I definitely find it worth listening to. I think a lot of people would. So where do people find you and listen to you at?
I appreciate it. So our podcast is the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, and we're on Apple, Spotify, I think some other random obscure streaming platforms. SoundCloud, maybe it's on there. Podbean, I think, as well. We're also on YouTube. We do publish all of our podcasts as videos as well on the YouTube channel. Like I said in a previous statement, I think it's about 90-10, or 99-1 is the odds of our listeners listening on YouTube. So if you're over 40, you might like the YouTube channel, is what I like to say. But we do have some stuff on the YouTube channel as well. Every once in a while, there is a more visual type of episode that we'll put out. So you can find us on YouTube as well. Yeah. So if you want to find us there, just subscribe to the podcast, and we only ask for positive ratings and reviews from people. We don't have any discount codes or anything like that. I think the biggest thing that we like to try to stand on, at least try to continue on for now, is that our opinions are not bought and paid for. I think in the media world, that's becoming less and less, and we don't make a living off of podcasting and media. That's not what we're into it for. We do this because we like it, and a lot of it's just our own hunting stories and stories from hunts up here, and we interview people that hunt up here and residents and all kinds of people. Yeah, episodes come out every other week, so you can find us anywhere you'd like.
Well, I appreciate that. And, just kind of that whole authenticity thing. We talked about that earlier, maybe I think before the show, just being cliche. I think it's important, man. And one of the reasons I like you guys, because you could tell that you're uh, not afraid to just speak how you feel about whatever topic you guys are talking about. That's also something that's lacking a lot in media these days. And I'm the same way. I have a couple of companies that I work with now, but the second somebody tells me what to say on my show, they're not going to be a partner anymore, because it's still my show. I was able to tell everybody before, like, I pay to be a podcaster, so I get to say whatever I want to say. Thankfully, I've had a couple of good partnerships that have been friendly to me, but it's still my show. I'm going to keep saying what I want to say as long as it's my show. And
exactly.
I'm not here to get famous. I just think there's not enough dudes sharing hunting stories and talking about things in a fun manner. It's just getting to be politicized or like just big commercials. So yeah, it's nice to just have good old boys talking about good old things. So I appreciate that from you guys.
Campfire stories. It's the oldest tradition in hunting, telling stories.
Talking about things we like to talk about.
Then, yeah, if you believe it, then I'll just tell you that most of the things we say are true. But, yeah.
Good deal. Dalton Gray, thanks very much for your time, brother. Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, worth a listen, folks. And I will also make the same request: like, share, subscribe, positive reviews. It's what keeps it going. So appreciate the listeners, appreciate you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. Folks, we'll be continuing on. I think the way this will probably play out is Joe Condilas is coming back on to talk about spring bear. He'll probably air after this, and then you guys, after that, you guys will be listening to turkey hunting for about a month. So, Dalton, you probably have no care in the world for turkey hunting, but if you get a wild hare, come on down to Idaho. It will guarantee you will find it to be more entertaining than you ever would have imagined.
I don't have anything against turkey hunting. Not at all. I would love to come down. I would love to do it with my recurve. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
There you go. Yeah. Folks, we got Turkey Month is coming up right around the corner. We'll be talking about spring turkey. We have some really good guests coming on. So please give it a listen and get ready, because we're gearing up for spring hunting here really, really soon. By the time you guys are listening to this, honestly, we're recording on February 11th. It's going to be here before you know it. So
yeah, if I can add one more thing,
go for it.
Just on my way out the door, I will end it with saying thank you for the opportunity to come on, and I'll end it with the tagline that we end our show with, which is tread lightly, but don't tread well. And do you know what that means?
You're going to have to inform me.
Okay. So I was curious to see if you knew what it meant, because my brother-in-law Mo asked me. He said, see if he knows what that means. So Timothy Treadwell was Grizzly Man. You've heard of him, right? Okay. So you've heard the old Teddy Roosevelt saying, walk softly but carry a big stick. Nowadays we say, tread softly or tread lightly. So we combine the two. Tread lightly, but don't tread well.
I love it. I dig it, man. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man. We'll catch everybody next week. And for real, stop the recording. Nope. There we go. Hey, folks, just wanted to take a quick break from the show to talk about my most recent partnership with a good friend of mine, Jake Collier, and his company, One Outdoors. One Outdoors provides a trusted place to purchase outdoor experiences, gear, and services. They aim to positively impact people and the environment by donating 10% of all of their net profits to Restoration Outdoors, a nonprofit, which in turn invests in mental health and conservation. One Outdoors offers trips around the globe, whether you're interested in hunting in Africa or fishing in Alaska, Patagonia, and more. They can customize your outdoor experiences and beyond just hunting and fishing to whitewater rafting. You name it, folks. If you can dream it up in the outdoors, One Outdoors can help make that dream come true. And I'm proud to be partnering with them and consulting on trips and hunts. So if you're interested in booking a trip of a lifetime with One Outdoors, you can reach me or reach out to me at thomas@pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. It's thomas@pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com, or you can contact me directly through Instagram, Facebook, you name it. But One Outdoors, folks, really excited to be working with these guys. So thank you very much for listening to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, and we'll get back to the show. Thanks again. And if this resonates with you, I want to welcome you to the tribe and encourage you to share this podcast with your friends. Hit subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Outdoors. And if you or someone you know has a great story about life or the wilderness, I want to share it. You can shoot me a message on Instagram or email me with all inquiries and questions at thomas@pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. That's Thomas, THOMAS, at pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. Until next time, get out there, get after it, and pursue freedom in the outdoors.